Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. In today's video we're going to be starting a series of videos that are going to be targeted to explain biology's Big Bang, which is a paper that I published on my website a couple of days ago. Now this series is going to be trying to explain my thought process regarding some of the things that were mentioned, and probably we're going to be diving into a little bit more details regarding to the points here. There are many things that are going to be added, things I couldn't actually add to the paper itself due to the restraints that we had regarding the word limit. However, I hope this provides a little bit more insight regarding the main idea of this paper, which is understanding how the concept or the theory of evolution has changed since the origin of species that was published in 1859 and right now as in biology as we know it. So let's get started after that very long introduction. It is no surprise that Darwinism has become the face of evolution for the longest of time, and this is very true because we know that Charles Darwin, for the most part, whenever we think of the theory of evolution, the first person that pops in mind is Charles Darwin. So it is natural to be portraying him. Whenever we see his picture, we associate him with this brilliant theory, and by all means I think this theory did actually staple a very major concept in a biologist's mind with regards to evolutionary biology. So perhaps since it was publicly displayed by Charles Darwin in 1859 upon publishing his paper, The Origin of Species, the basis of the theory stemmed from natural selection, which was laid out to be the force that is resulting in the variation of organisms in a population. Now, I just like to mention here that there are many references that were used to prepare this paper. So if you'd like to have a look at this paper and the rest of the references, they're all going to be on my website. Even though classical Darwinism, now here I mentioned classical Darwinism, I just want to point out that by this I mean all the information that Charles Darwin himself mentioned back in The Origin of Species back about 180 years ago. So by classical Darwinism I mean the core of what Charles Darwin basically deduced from his findings. It was widely accepted by the general public at the time, and but it actually lacked the genetic background. Now, I'd like to mention something here, that George Mendel was at that time, in about the 1850s, he was working on his genetic, his experiments, most specifically the peas experiment that we probably all know, and it actually went unnoticed, so Charles Darwin did not take these things into account, which is a major flaw, well, one of the major flaws in Charles Darwin's theory. So basically, at that time, George Mendel's work went unnoticed. Next, pioneering work from Fisher, Wright, and Haldane brought upon the genetic basis of evolution. Basically, these scientists have merged between the theory of evolution that Darwin has come up and basically deduced, and the genetic information and the hereditary information that we were able to deduce from George Mendel's work, which was brilliant, by the way. Regarding this, there are a couple of controversies, by the way, regarding this whole topic, and I'd like you to go and read this in your own free time, actually, and hopefully maybe in later videos we can discuss that. Next, basically, their work shed light on the mesh between the concept of evolution brought up by Charles Darwin at the time, what the scientific community knew about heredity. So this was very important. Basically, meshing between these two concepts refined the concept of evolution, allowed us to understand even more some of the intricate details that were not very clear at the time with regards to Darwin's work alone. Now, Dobzhansky, Julius Huxley, Mayer, and Simpson also worked on the modern synthesis of evolutionary biology, which is also known as Neo-Darwinism. So basically, this mesh of work by many brilliant scientists have basically refined the theory of evolution, and this new concept, if you'd like, the refined version, is called Neo-Darwinism, and also it was tagged the modern synthesis of evolutionary biology. So basically, this theory is a more advanced, a more refined version of what Charles Darwin have wrote in his book The Origin of Species. After amendment, there were 6 major concepts that have been brought together by the scientists mentioned previously to explain evolution. Now, the main idea behind these videos, behind this video and the one after that, is going to be going through some of the concepts regarding the modern synthesis, what they were able to deduce from this modern synthesis of evolutionary biology theory, and later we're going to be discussing the different advancements at different timelines as the time went along. So the first a concept that we're going to be tackling is the infinitesimally small changes. Strict gradualism was brought up by Charles Darwin, and he emphasized on the point that natural selection can only act by the preservation and accumulation of infinitesimally small modifications that occur within an organism and are beneficial to them. Essentially, and to simplify this further, basically the idea behind this concept was that there are small mutations that, as we all know, are going to be happening constantly in our body. These beneficial changes are going to be staying, and gradually these are going to be accumulating, eventually leading to speciation. Now, how important these infinitesimally small changes were and how right this concept is going to be discussed later on in the videos. What was rather interesting is that he mentioned if it was to be proved that any complex organ existed without the gradualistic movement, and this theory would break down. This educated prediction turned out to be obviously false, and that will be discussed later. Now, I'd like to also mention a little bit, and just hold on to this point, where Charles Darwin made a very optimistic, if you want to frame it this way, optimistic observation, and saying that if any organ that we have or any tissue that we have originated in a different manner, which that's the case, then his theory would break down. Obviously, his theory was concreted in place, and even though these were not true, there are many things that he said that still stand true till this day, and that's why we still take his theory as a staple, as some staple information with regards to evolutionary biology. Uniformitarianism. That's a handful to say, by the way. I practice a lot to say it properly. Closely tied to gradualism. Recall that gradualism is that gradual changes, small changes that are going to be accumulating over time to get us to where we are today. Uniformitarianism, or the uniformitarian principle, is the belief that natural laws, evolution in this scenario, operate in the universe now just the same as they have in the past. And they are the same anywhere in the universe. In other words, it tells us that the process of evolution today is exactly the same as it were thousands and millions of years ago. This concludes our first episode, our introduction episode on evolutionary biology, if you'd like, principle. And this is going to be succeeded with multiple videos regarding this article. I'd like to thank all of you guys for watching. This has been Ali from B Biology.